In this tutorial, we'll be making the water element stone from the movie The Fifth Element. First thing you want to do is go to your front camera. You can do that by pressing spacebar. You should get this view here. If you don't, go over to the left and click this little button right here with the 4 squares. And then find your camera view that has front. Mine is right here. Yours might be somewhere else, but I'm going to hover over the front and hold down spacebar. When I hold down, just tap. And then now we're in the front view. Now I'm going to go to View, Image Plane, Import Image, and I'll navigate to my reference photo, which should be this one right here. And now's a good time to save, so Control S. You might have to figure out where you want to save, but I've already got a file going here. Now we can spacebar back, find your perspective camera, hover right there, press spacebar, then press W with this selected. You might have clicked off. If you've clicked off, just click right back on it, press W, and then move your image plane back. And now when we're working, we want to make sure we can't select this. So with this selected, press this button right here. It's a little plane with a circle on it. That'll jump it into its own layer. Double click layer 1. And you can name it, call it image plane or anything else that you'd like. Hit save. And then this third button here, it should be open right now. Click it twice. And it should say R. Now you can click off, and if you try to click your image plane, it won't come back. It won't get in your way. But actually, before we do that, let's go back into our front view. You can zoom in by holding down Alt and right mouse button at the same time, then pull the mouse towards you. You should zoom in. Technically it's not a zoom, it's a dolly, but still, it'll get bigger. Let's click that R one more time to unlock it, then click your image, and then with W for move, move it up to where the bottom about meets your horizontal plane here. And we might even want to scale this up a little bit. Move it back up. Then you can move your camera by holding down Alt and the middle mouse button and then just drag. Then release both. You can also zoom in with your middle mouse scroll wheel. Double click this button again, R, to restrict it so you can't click it. And now we're ready to model, but I am going to go back into perspective just to show you what we're doing. So spacebar, hover over perspective, spacebar again. So if you haven't seen the movie, The Fifth Element, the stones are triangular shaped, except one piece of them is beveled to have a flat face. So I've got a side image here. Pretty much the other 3 sides are going to be close to this width, with the bevel obviously restricting the width on that. So the easiest way to get this basic shape is to create a cylinder. Up here on the top left, just click cylinder once. The cylinder will pop up in the center. To focus on that, just tap F on your keyboard. It'll zoom in. And right now we have a 20-sided cylinder. In your channel box, there should be this tab here. You might be in modeling or attribute editor, but a tab should say channel box. Click that. And there should be polycylinder 1. Click that, and you should see something similar to this. In subdivision axis, change that from 20 to 3. And then to orient this in the direction that we want to model it, we're going to have to rotate it, I think, by 30 degrees. And over here we can see the rotations and translates and scales. We just rotated it on the y-axis, minus 30.952. We want minus 30, so just type in minus 30, hit enter. And now it's perfectly aligned that way. Let's go back to our front view, so spacebar, hover over front, spacebar, and you'll notice that our topology is occluding the image, and we don't really want that. I'm going to Control Z to snap that back down to where it was. So we'll go to shading up here, and X-ray, and just to show you, that's only going to affect this camera. So if I hit spacebar, go back to perspective, that's still solid. It's still solid in all of our other cameras. That's only affecting right here. So now I want to line this up with our water elemental stone. So I'm going to pull this over here, zoom in a bit, maybe scale it down. I'll tap R on the keyboard for scale. And with this middle square in the middle hovered over, I'm going to click down, hold down, and pull in this direction to scale it down and scale it back up just a little bit. Then I'm going to go into vertex mode by holding down right mouse button over our topology. Go to vertex, release. I'm going to marquee select these top vertices right here. So hold down your left mouse button, create a marquee selection, and get all those vertices, and then release. They should turn yellow. And just to show you something, you might also want to check this, press spacebar, and then back to perspective. You want to make sure you have all 4 vertices selected. Sometimes selection is based on camera, and I can show you what that is. I'm going to double click this little arrow up here for the selection sets, or the selection menu. Mine popped up off screen, so I'll pull it over here. Camera-based selection is typically not what you want, so I'm going to click that to turn it on just to show you. Camera-based selection means if you drag a marquee like this, it'll only select the things you can see based on this camera. So that one isn't selected right now. Even though if I were to click off to deselect, then deselect that little checkbox and do this, then everything within that was selected. This is typically how I like to work versus the camera based, because when I drag this, I want to get everything in there. So I'm going to turn that off. Marquee select, we have everything. And that's pretty important when you're working in a front, side, or top view camera. Whenever you're doing this, you know you want to get at everything, or you know you want to grab everything. So with all of those grabbed, I'm going to tap W to move, and I'm going to pull this all the way up. And that is the basic shape of that elemental stone. Now let's start adding some edge loops through here to make these wavy insets. So to do that, we'll grab the multi-cut tool. By default, it should be up here for you when you're under the modeling preset and tabbed into polygon. It's also under the mesh tools, I think. Yep, multi-cut. And then over here on this tab, it also lives here in the tools. So just grab multi-cut, and then you'll see it's wanting to jump to an edge or to a vertice, but we don't want to do that right now. We just want to hold down Control and then hover over an edge, and we should get a horizontal line. Wherever you click, it will make a horizontal line. Or if you're doing it here, it'll be vertical, I suppose. But right here, we want horizontal. So we want to kind of follow these insets. So we're going to click once here. And if you try to hold it in the same place, it'll jump to a vertical. We have to go to the side now. And then we have to click here. And now we want to make sure that all of our other rungs of this are going to be the same width as this. But for now, we're just going to arbitrarily click along. Just kind of eyeball it. Alright, and then to drop this tool, because you'll notice you can't actually select anything and it'll want to start cutting again, just tap Q on the keyboard and it will drop your current tool and it'll automatically go back to select. So now we want to make sure that we have the same width going down, so press spacebar and go into your perspective view. You don't have to go here, I'm just showing you what we're doing. We're going to grab this top face that we know is the correct width that we want, just click once, and then hold down Shift, hold down right click to radial menu, and go down to duplicate face and release your click. That just made a new face right here. We can kind of pull it out a little bit, pull it off to the side, and then just click out into space. Now is a good time to save, so Control S, you should get this student file or student version file warning. It's okay, just click OK or click continue. And also now is a good time to delete history. So go to Edit, Delete All by Type History, and I'm going to go back to Channel Box just because I liked being able to see, you know, where things are, mathematically wise. If you notice we were still in face mode, you might have still been in face mode, that's okay. Just go back to object mode. And I want you to see that we're going to use this shape to define the rest of the width here. And the way we're going to do that is click it, tap W. You'll notice your gizmo is down here. So if you were to scale or rotate this at all, it'd rotate from that point. We don't want that, so Control Z to that. I'm going to tap W real quick, and then D as in dog, and you'll notice this change. So D, and now it wants to know where I want to put the gizmo. I'm going to reorient this gizmo. So I'm going to hold down V as in Victor and the middle mouse button, and I'm going to hover over this vertice right here, and it should snap. If you hover over any other vertices, it'll snap there, but we want it to snap right here. Then I'm going to release the middle mouse button and release V. Then to say OK, this is where I want it, I'm going to tap W one more time, and then it's there. Now we can move it from there, rotate it from there, etc. I'm going to Control Z that. Going to go back to W, and we know that this is the same width as this because this is an exact copy of that. So now we're going to move this down to this edge line by pressing the little box here. Just click and hold, or I think we need to hold down V first. Hold down V as in Victor, and then left click this little circle thing, and it'll want to snap around. So snap it to right there. And now with object mode, we should be in object mode. Just click your big box here. Then go to edge mode. Double click your edge line. It should select all the edges all the way around. And then click this right here, this up and down handle. And then holding down V again. Actually, wait, go to this one right here. Just double click that edge. Holding down V with this as yellow. If you click these, they'll turn yellow. That means they're waiting for a command for you to, I guess, snap to. So just click the up and down, hold down V, middle mouse button, and it'll snap right there. Just to show you, we could snap it up here or up there, down, but we want to snap right there. Press W, and then click off. Then you want to click your measuring piece right here. Same deal, V, hold down, it'll go down there. Click this, edge. Make sure that this one's highlighted, hold down V, middle mouse, it'll snap. Go back to object mode, V, just drag it down, back to edge, and we're just going to measure all these to this width here. Okay, now these are all perfectly the same width. Now's a good time to save. And on top of that, how we made a copy over here, now's a good time to make a copy of this. So Control D, W, move it off to the side, maybe even move it all a little bit off to the side. And now, if we go back to our front camera, we're ready to start adding these wobbles into it. So a good way to do that is in your modeling toolkit, there should be Insert Edgeloop. Oh man, there isn't. Okay, so Insert Edgeloop is in Mesh Tools, Insert Edgeloop. This is very important. I don't know why it's not here, and it's not in the default browser up here, but Insert Edgeloop. Go back to perspective real quick. You'll see my cursor has changed to a little, I guess, pointy arrow. If I just start clicking on edges, I can start inserting edge loops. I'm going to Control Z that. Let me show you the options box for this. So go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop, and click this little box right here. So mine has opened up off the side of my screen. This is the tool settings for mine. I'm going to reset my tool to default. What we want to do is go to Multiple Edge Loops, and just for the sake of showing you, I'm going to move this to 1. This is always going to be equal to distance. So if I have one edge loop, it's going to have an equal distance on both sides. So mathematically, that means it's going to be in the direct center. So even if I click right here, it'll pop to the center. And then if I want to put one in the center over here, all I have to do is click again. And same deal, it'll just keep dividing. But we don't need that right now. What we want are 3. And I guess technically if we did this, this, and this, we would get 3 lines down the middle that are perfectly distanced, but we don't want all this stuff at the top. So Control Z, we'll just type in 3 right here and click once. Then I'm going to move this back off to the side. I press Q to drop that tool, so now I'm not, adding more edges. Then I'm going to go back into our front view, and then I'm going to, without holding down anything, I'm going to hold down right mouse button, go to Vertex. I'm going to marquee select all of these vertices here. I'm going to press W, and I'm going to move them down just a little bit. Then I'm going to do the same thing over here, except now I'm going to move them up just a little bit. And if we wanted to get super accurate, we could, bring in a new box like this. Oops. Don't do this, I'm just showing you. We could bring this in, and then we could like snap this vertex to like this distance, and then this vertex to this distance, and then redo all that measurement to make sure that it's the same distance on both sides, but it's not that big of a deal. If you want to do that, you can. I'm just eyeballing this. However, eyeballing it, I think I do need to move this down just a bit. Okay, so that's going to create the wobble. And if you've noticed, this is a 3-sided shape, which is basically the same all the way around, or it's going to be the same all the way around. except if you bring this over, on this edge, it's going to be chamfered, and then about, I don't know, what is that, maybe 1/8 all the way back, it's not going to have a wobble. We can fix that later, but for now, just to make it easy, we're going to take this whole face here, this whole side, and we'll duplicate it. We'll make 2 more copies and bring it all the way around and then merge it together, so it's a lot easier to work with. We can carry this shape all the way through without having to go through and make more edges and then grab verts and wiggle them around. A good way to do that is, well, first save, and then I'm going to duplicate this over in case we mess up. Work on this piece. I'm going to select all these faces. So go to face mode. That's just without holding down anything, just other than right mouse button, go to faces, and then you can start selecting faces. You can do a marquee select here, and then hold down Control and marquee select on the opposite side, and then you're just left with these right here. So remember how we duplicated this face earlier? We'll do the same thing here. We'll do Shift, right click to radial menu, duplicate face, and then we'll tap Q, click off into space, and then we'll marquee select through this. Oops. Well, with that there, we can still go to object mode. Marquee select through. And then remember, control marquee through here, because we don't want this big piece right now. We just want this. I'm going to make sure that it is its own deal. It is. I'm going to press Shift P to unparent it, because if you note, I'll do Control 0 quick. It was parented within this big group right here. Don't want that. I'm going to do Shift P to bring it out to be its own thing. And then I'm going to delete history. I have a shortcut right here, but remember, edit, delete all by type history. And then I'm also going to freeze transforms, because if you see we have a scale of 0.974, it's been rotated 30 degrees, it's been translated, blah, blah, blah. We don't want all that. So we're just going to go to modify, freeze transformations. So notice, if we tap E to rotate, it's going to rotate perfectly along this axis, because it still is retaining its gizmo from its old parent right here, which is fine. That's what we want. So I'm going to Control D to duplicate. Gonna wiggle it to try and rotate it 60 degrees, I think it is. No, it's gonna be 120. But over here it's, you know, minus 119. We got close. We'll just type in minus 120 here. Hit enter. Make sure you're no longer cursored in there, so I'll just usually wiggle my camera. And then I'm going to do Shift D for shift duplicate, and it'll automatically pop over with that same transform we just did. So now we have 3. And remember, the original is still in there, so we can just marquee select here, Control click once, and then we have our 3 pieces. So then I'm going to do a Shift radial menu with right click, combined, and I don't really want this middle piece anymore, the big piece, which is the same as this, but I'm still going to drag it off to the side just to get out of the way. And then I'm going to make sure that all these line up. They do. However, if we go into vertex mode with right click, vertex, click on any of these verts on the edge and move them. Notice it's not actually stuck together. We still have these 3 pieces that are separate faces or separate contiguous meshes. Like if we go into face mode and double click, if you double click any set of faces, it'll select every face attached to that piece. So it'll select all the contiguous faces. So for example, if we go over here, go to face, double click, grabs the whole object because everything's welded together. If we come over here, because remember it was 3 separate pieces that we put together, we haven't welded it yet. So we want to weld that. So how we'll do that is we'll go into object mode, just select it in object mode, go to edit mesh, merge, and this distance threshold is any vertices within this distance of each other will be welded together. I'm not sure what scale we're working at here. I think I'm in millimeters, so this should be fine. We'll just check. Go to a vertex on the edge, wiggle it around. Okay, cool. Everything's merged. Also, an easy way to check for that is to go into smooth preview mode. If you tap 3 at the top of your keyboard with an object selected, it will show you what a smooth would look like, previewed. So you noticed if we were to smooth this object, it loses its sharp edges. And what a smooth is if you were to take this object, shift, right click to radial menu, smooth, it's going to add a lot of extra topology. And when it does that, it averages those faces when subdividing. So it kind of well, smooths it. So that's what it would be like if we wanted to commit a smooth, but now this is a lot of topology, and we can't really step back. It's harder to work with this way, so Control Z a couple times. If you did that with me, you didn't really need to. So that's why we do smooth preview. We can just see what it's going to look like when we smooth. We're going to be doing a lot of that coming up. So back into smooth preview. Actually, I'm going to get rid of this just by deleting history. Or you could just click off and then click back on, I think. Maybe wiggle your camera, but deleting history is, again, edit mesh, delete all by type history. So this is still in smooth preview, by the way. So you can smooth preview stuff, tap 3, and then just go about your business over here, and they're still over there being smooth previewed. If you want to get out of that, you just tap 1 on the keyboard. And if you want to smooth preview with 2 iterations, you just tap 2. And it'll show you also your old topology. But 3 is 3 subdivisions, 2 is, I think 2 with, nope, 2 is just both. 2 is 3 subdivisions with your old topology showing, and then 1 is to drop out of that. But a way to control that, I'm going to show you why that works the way it does. So we're going to add an edge loop with multi-cut. Hold down Control, put an edge here. You don't really even have to do this, I'm just showing you what's going to happen. So if I put an edge really tight here, and really tight here, and farther back here, and farther back here, I'm going to drop the tool with Q, go back into object mode, smooth preview with 3. You notice it's held its shape. And that one's a little bit softer, and then this one's really soft. So the closer edges and vertices are to each other, the more that crease is going to show up, the more that shape is going to show up. So I'm going to Control Z a few times. Actually, I don't even need to do that. I'll just delete these edges. Double click that, double click there, Shift double click to add these together, or Shift Control double click, and then I'll Shift, radial menu, delete edge. Because deleting edge that way is going to get rid of any vertices that might be left behind. Don't just select an edge and hit delete. So for example, if I just hit delete on the keyboard, see all this shape is still here? If I go to vertex, those vertices are still there. I literally only deleted the edge. If I go back to edge mode, double click here and go shift, right click radial menu, delete edge, it's going to delete the edge and all the vertices associated with it, which is typically what you want, but don't do that right now. I'm just showing you as an example. So what we want when we smooth is this general shape here, but you'll notice we're not getting that. So we need to make that happen. And the way we're going to make that happen is by adding more topology. So go into edge mode, double click your top horizontal edge loop, and then you can either shift double click or shift control double click. And the difference is if you have shift selected, and let's say, we've already got these edges selected here, hold down shift, left click to marquee. Say, oh, well, I want to select all these. Shift plus click means add, right? Not really, not in Maya. Shift plus click means select everything other than what you already have selected within the marquee. So you'll notice these two edges, I'm doing the same thing, shift, it's going to deselect those two edges and select everything else. So with shift control click, you'll actually select everything. So shift double click or shift control double click will work fine here. I'm going to tap F to frame. So I don't know if I told you that. I think I told you that in the very beginning. So whenever you have a thing selected, like we just want to see these two, tap F, it'll zoom in. If you want to see the whole thing, tap F. But we had these here. And another thing, let's say you click off or you misclick, you can just do Control Z a couple times and it'll go back to that selection. So you don't have to re-click through everything. But we have these. I'm going to go back into my front view. And kind of looking at this thickness, I'm going to try to recreate this thickness really easily by doing a bevel command. So I'm going to do shift, right click radial menu, bevel edge. And actually perspective might be better for you and me. So it's given us this thickness and we want to play with the fraction here, maybe 0.3. We're looking at this right here. Yeah, 0.3 looks like that looks correct. All right. So now when we smooth, it's still gonna deform on the sides and it's kind of looking better here. We can see that waviness. It's because we've added more edge loops to define that shape. I am, however, if you notice, I'm gonna go back to smooth preview. See how this edge jumps up? That's this edge here. and it's jumping up this far. That's because there's no edges above it to tell it not to go up. So I'm going to add one above it with the multi-cut tool. Hold down Control. It looks kind of wonky because it's going to follow this topology, remember, because it's wavy here. And if you pull this all the way up, it kind of straightens out. So it's a gradual curve. But we're just going to pop one right there. Doesn't have to be exact, just something arbitrary. Now when you press 3, that one's the one that pops up instead of the actual cut in we're going to do. So to do that cut in, it's going to be an extrude, and we're going to extrude inwards. Go to face mode, hovering over this with your cursor, right click, face, click once on this poly right here, or whatever part of this loop that you're on, just once there, and then shift, double click, and it should select the whole loop. And then again, holding down shift, click once here, shift, double click, shift, click, shift, double click, shift, click, shift, double click, and same down here and here. And I just realized, I'm sorry I just made you do all that, but you're going to have to redo it in just a moment. I want you to go to object mode, or hit Control D, W, and save that off to the side just in case we need to step back. I'm going to move all of this over. And then, of course, Control S for saving. Go back to this. It might have saved our face selection. Let's hope it did. We're going to go to face. It did. Awesome. Alright, going to also delete history. I have a shortcut here, but remember it is in Edit, Delete All by Type History. Now we're going to extrude inwards. There's a couple ways to do this. Just in the same way that there's the multi-cut tool that lives in several places, you can go to Shift, right-click, radial menu, extrude face. It's right here. It's super quick. This is the way I do it. But you can also extrude face with this button here, or you can go into the Modeling Toolkit tab and extrude face here under Components. So I'm going to do the radial menu way. Shift, right-click, hold down, extrude face. And you can either play with this gizmo, you can push it in until you feel that's right. However, if you're doing the push-in method, I don't know why this is, but if you notice, this is longer than this here. And it's not going to give you a complete, inset. So what I'm going to actually do is Control Z, and I'm going to use thickness here. So one way to play with thickness is you can either click and hold here and drag left and right, but you'll notice it's not that, or it's way too sensitive basically. I think we can do Control, click, or maybe it's Alt. No, it's probably Control. So that's a little bit better. Or you can just type in values. But this, you'll notice, I think is the same length. It's not the same length, but it's cutting in at the same rate, I believe. So using thickness is going to be better than, pulling this in, because it's got a little bit of, see, even when you bring it back, this is already lining up and this is not. So I like using the thickness slider. Also, I'm going to re-zero that. So to be completely accurate with what we want to do, this is fine, but for our purposes in baking, and you'll see what baking is in a bit, I'm going to actually kind of squish this in some just so we can get some detail when we end up baking. So I think that is in the offset. I'm going to do a 0.05. I'm sorry, a minus 0.05. Nope, it is a positive. And that's way too much. So 0.01. That looks better. It still might be a little bit too much. 0.005. Okay, I know it's subtle, but later on when we bake, it'll show up a lot better. So I will delete history and save. This is a good time to pull this off to the side since we just did a command on it. Refocus on that. Remember, you can just click it, press F, and it'll frame it. I just realized I messed up. However, that's good for you, I guess, because now you get some repetition in your life. I'm going to bring this over here, the one that we didn't bevel, or the one that we didn't extrude in. I'm going to Control D, go back to my channel box, and tap 0 in this field to bring it back to the center. And the reason I messed up is because, if we bring this back, remember, there's no inset here. What I did was I actually made an inset there, and it would have been too late if I went to bevel. So I'm going to grab this piece, the one that we haven't inset yet. Double click this edge, and I'm going to hit our bevel button that lives here, or you can do shift, right click radio menu, bevel edge, and gonna eyeball it. It's probably a little bit sharper than that, so maybe 0.3. That looks about right. And then when we go into extrude inwards, I want to not, maybe I can show you that right now. Nah. We'll just extrude inwards and I'll show you how to control that shape in a minute. I'm gonna delete history. Now we can go select this face here. So where we just beveled, this flat face here, you want to go one over and then select this piece, not this one. So right there, shift, double click, shift, double click, make sure you're following this edge loop, and then shift, double click. So we want three pieces not selected in between the actual selection. So we're going to do that all the way down. Shift, double click, shift, double click, shift, double click, holding down shift the whole time. And we might be able to get away with it a little bit quicker by doing it this way. Still double clicking. Nope. I can actually show you this too. This might be faster. So shift, double click, select the whole loop. Then top down, you can just marquee select right there. And that'll deselect everything. So remember, it's control marquee select, not shift or shift control marquee select. So now we've got those pieces. Now we will extrude inwards. I think our thickness was 0.03 minus 0.03. And then the offset was 0.005. Alright. So back to object mode. Now duplicate this off, save this over, and probably delete that one. Don't forget, save your work, Control S. So now we have, if I'm gonna turn off wireframe for a moment. We have this cut in, and I'm also gonna turn on anti-aliasing so you can see shading a little bit better. And then smooth preview with 3. We're almost there with the high poly. This is almost done. But see how there's kind of some gross shading here, and it doesn't cut in all that well. It doesn't really show its shape that much, and it's too soft on the edges. And we still need to fill in the top and the bottom. Also, we don't need this anymore. I'm going to delete this. So I'm going to click back on this, tap 1 to leave smooth preview. And I'm going to show you how we can control this shading here. We're going to make this tighter to where it actually helps it cut in a little bit more. The way we do that, tap 1 to exit smooth preview. Go back to Insert Edge Loop tool, which is in Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop. You want to have your settings up, so you might want to do Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Box to bring this up. And let's do, I think we can get away with 1. Well, to make this even across, let's just do 2, so it's perfectly even on both sides. Click here, we'll go over here, and we'll click here. And then because we're trying to just control these faces here, or these edges here when we smooth, we're just going to need this line. So we'll go to edge mode, delete that, delete that. And now when we smooth, that's a little bit better. It doesn't stretch so much. So now to really make that dug in, we're going to go to face mode, and looking down at about this angle so you can see everything, we're going to shift, or click once, shift, double click, with shift still held down, click, double click, click, double click, click, double click, and keep on going with shift held down the whole way. Going to tap F to frame it, and you'll notice that when we shift double clicked, we selected this entire edge loop of all of these, and it wrapped around here, and all we have are those selected. So now we're going to hold down Control, right click to this radial menu. This isn't the tool menu, this is the selection menu. Then we're going to go to edges, hover above that, it'll open up a new radial, and then go over to here to edge perimeter, and then release your click button. Now we have just the edge perimeter of that selection selected. Now we're going to bevel this, because ultimately when we bevel, we're adding edge loops to edges, and when we smooth, the closer edges are to other edges, the more that area is defined. So we're going to define these by adding a bevel to it. So bevel button is here, or if you want, shift, right click, bevel. And this might be fine just by default. I'm going to tap 3 to see. And then I'm also going to click off into space, go to object mode just to get rid of the selection, select off into space, just to see the shading. Really all I'm focusing on right now is the shape here. That's all right. It could probably be a little bit sharper. I'll show you how to get back to those options. So let's say you did this test and you don't like the result. So you click object mode, or in object mode you click back here, and that little toolbox is gone. You even go back into edge mode and the toolbox is gone. That's fine. Just tap T, or go to object mode and tap T, and it'll pop right back up. As long as, 0.5 I believe it was, as long as your last action was to apply a bevel or any other tool, you can just go back to this thing. Let's say that's gone. As long as you don't delete history, we'll go back into face or whatever. So object mode, it's gone. All you have to do is tap T on the keyboard, and that'll pop back up. But if you start doing other stuff like extrusions or whatnot, you'll be too late. You won't be able to grab this anymore. Or if you delete history, you're going to actually remove this poly bevel thing happening right here, which is this, and you won't be able to press T anymore. So while it's here, be sure you use it. I'm going to just see again. Maybe we can play with it some. Maybe if we turn chamfer on, it's probably too sharp. We'll try 1. Now it's kind of cutting in up here, and I don't like that. So turn chamfer off, or turn chamfer on. Well, it was on before. I did an on, or an off, my bad. 0.5. Okay, so what chamfer is with chamfer off, you'll notice it goes back to a little 90-degree angle. We've got 1, 2, 3 edges here. If you turn chamfer on, it's going to basically cut away this middle piece and remove this sharp edge. It'll bevel it, or technically it's called chamfer. So that is there. And remember, we just removed an edge, so it's a softer look. But with chamfer off, the edge is back, so it's a harder look because there's more edges. I'm going to turn that on to remove that middle edge because the soft edge is more visually appealing to me. Okay, tap 1 to go back to smooth preview. Now we're going to see how the corners fall apart still. We're going to refine those. So you guessed it, we're going to go into edge mode, double click there, shift double click here, and shift double click this one and this one. And how do we define shapes better? We add more edges. What's an easy way to add more edges to an edge? Bevel. So we'll bevel, and I'm going to turn chamfer. Actually, this might be a good lesson for you in mitering. How is it wanting to solve this? That might be okay. So mitering and miter along is just a different method of how one would bevel a thing, or how you would cut an edge off. It's a CAD thing, like actual manufacturing terms. In Maya, it pretty much just breaks stuff, so just know that. So if your bevels aren't working correctly, just play with the mitering settings and the miter along settings. Center or edge are typically pretty okay. If it does auto and auto are sometimes alright too. Like, let's just see here. It's not doing anything drastically dumb. Sometimes it does. This might be too much of a bevel back here. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to step back a couple, just to where we had those edges selected. And then I'm going to deselect these because these angles are different than this. So we might want to give this a different bevel value than those. So again, just radial menu, bevel. And probably 0.2. We turn chamfer off Let's bring back that middle piece just to see if it's sharp enough. I think that looks all right. Go over here, click these edges, and bevel again. So we just did bevel. So we can tap G on the keyboard to redo our last command. So G, we'll do a new bevel here. I'm going to turn chamfer off, and this should be sharp enough. Let me look here. It's probably all right. I could probably go a little bit sharper. So I'm going to select this, tap T, and fraction maybe 0.3. That's a little bit more refined. These rounded. So in the movie, it looks like they're kind of more blunt. And I couldn't find any reference images that did this correctly. So if you wanted to blunt these up, and actually this is the best time to do it, honestly. So let's do that right now. So with our insert edge loop tool, I have a shortcut up here because it should be up here, but I didn't feel like putting it up there. We'll go to mesh tools, insert edge loop, options box. My options box is back off to the side. I'll bring it back over. Again, I want one kind of close to here. So I could either, insert one and then slide it over, but that might not be exactly accurate to what it would be over here. So an easy way to do that is just get it as close as we can. Technically we could crank this all the way up, but I'm just going to do 2. Click there and click there. And all I want is this edge here, so I'll just double click that to select it. Shift double click this one to select it, and then shift radial menu delete edge. And that just leaves these closer ones. So now when we smooth, it's much more circular instead of kind of stretched out. Okay, so save. And a long time ago, I should have had to do this, but even I forgot. Control D, pull this off to the side because we need to step back. Now we're going to close up the top and the bottom, and we'll be done with the high poly. So I'm just going to double click this top part here. Shift, right click radial menu, extrude edge. I'm going to tap W. Now I should have just tapped R, but same deal, just tap R. And with this middle box right here, click and hold and drag it in a good ways, and then do that one more time. You can hold G, or just tap G, my mistake. Tap it once, and then we just did a new extrude, and a quick way to just get that merged to the center without even having to touch that or touch scale, you can go to Shift, right click to radial menu, merge collapse edges at the top, and then that new one that opens up, just go up one more time, release your mouse button, and it'll merge to the middle. So one thing that's really weird about Maya, you'll notice that it thought the center of this piece, even with this cut off, it would still do this. For some reason, it brings the center up away from this, and I'm not sure why. I think it's because it creates a bounding box, and it goes based on the bounding box. That's not the true center, right? It should be, back here where it was before, but that's not a big deal. We can actually fix that if we really need to, but we don't need to. So we want to, smooth preview, see how this doesn't hold up. Well, we know how to fix that. We'll just go to edge mode, double click here, and then we'll bevel. Bevel button's right here. Probably turn chamfer off, and this looks good as it is. Let me see if it's, see how this is kind of wobbly? Like right there, that's not, and then it even makes this crooked. So we're going to do miter along center, and it fixed that. But now this is way too tight, so maybe a fraction of 1. Oh, and the thing about fractions, like if we put like 10, it would still work, but stuff starts to cut into itself. So a fraction of 1 is the most you can bevel before some vertice along this edge intersects with another vertice. So 1 is usually the best you can do without starting to break stuff. And if you're going to break stuff, you can do that. You'll just have to go in by hand and fix where it breaks. So let's go to object mode, preview. It's probably too tight. So back to T. I'm going to turn chamfer on. Smooth. That might work. So one way to fix that is just arbitrarily I'm going to select the multi-cut tool up here. Going to hover over any of these edges right here, hold down Control, drag out an edge to about here, and one underneath to about here, just to hold this shape. And for funsies, one in the middle too, just so nothing gets stretched too far. Tap Smooth Preview, and that's looking a lot better. Alright, so same thing down here. Edges, radial menu with Shift, extrude edge, tap R, bring it in some, or a good amount at least. Then G, then Shift, right click, merge to center. Go into edge mode, double click here, bevel, and turn miter onto center. I think we had chamfer off, and we turn that to 1, or chamfer was on, and we turned that to 1. And then we added an edge loop with multi-cut here and here. And also just one in the middle, just to control. Smooth preview. Alrighty. That will function as a high poly for sure. Press Control S to save. And tap W. We kind of want this to be in the middle. Also delete history. I have a shortcut here, but again, edit, delete all by type, history. If you want a shortcut, I believe it is. All you have to do is do anything up here in these menus, hover over it, and then do Control Shift click, and it'll create a shortcut. So I have a shortcut right here. Where'd it go? If I scroll down with my middle mouse button, I have a lot of buttons up here, so I'll go down to the next row, and it just made one right here. So that did work. It's Control Shift click, anything up here, and then it'll pop down into here. So I want to make this to the center. So with W selected, grab this handle here. We want to snap it here, so I'm going to hold down X and just pull it along. Should snap. That should be the center. Cool. And now, like if you want this centered, like if you want a point on your mesh to represent its exact center, we know that when we brought it in, when we created it, its exact center was the world center. So we could just take this vertex and, well, it might be better this way. Do the bottom one first, it'll be easier to tell. We snapped it there, and then take this vertex, wiggle it a bit, and then same deal, hold down X and snap it there with middle mouse button. Leave smooth preview. There. Now you know that's the exact center of the mesh. So with that, we will freeze transforms just because we want to get rid of that transform. We'll go. I have a shortcut, of course, but modify freeze transformations is what you want, unless you make your own shortcut. Now we want to make our low poly. So we want to make a shape that's going to encompass the basic silhouette of this. It's not going to be too far away from it, and it's not going to cut too much in. So we already have that shape. It is right here, technically. However, all this extra topology, kind of a pain in the butt. We could fix that easily, or we could grab this, or an older one, without the cuts. We could just grab our original one and chamfer that edge. I'll show you both ways, actually. So bring this over here. Is it about there? I'm just eyeballing over here to figure out, yes, that is still true 0, so I'll tap 0 there. And then I'll freeze transforms, for me, shortcut, but for you, modify, freeze transformations. And also, to help us out, I'm going to move this out of the way just for a moment. I'm going to click our high poly that is not in smooth preview. It can be or cannot, doesn't matter. Over it, I'm going to right click, hold down. Going to go to favorite material, or assign favorite material, Lambert. Doesn't matter which one of these, Lambert is just the most basic, it's easiest to work with. And that should change this over here. If you've got a bunch of stuff up here, remember, just delete history and it should clear it out. Mine's cleared, but it should have made something called Lambert 2, or any Lambert other than 1. Basically, you want to look for that. Click that tab. Right here is color. If you want to click this once, it'll bring up this color palette. I think if you bring your mouse off, it'll go away. So just click again. And then you want to drag these colors out. Any color you want. I'll go pure red. And then just leave it, and it'll be red. So the reason I did that is if you go back to, oh yes, what was that, in attributes? You can find that in your attributes tab. If you want to go back to moving stuff around, just go back to your channel box. So click this, go back to channel box. I'm going to move this back to 0. So the idea is typically when we're making a high and a low poly, we don't want to see any of the color of the high poly unless it's Z-fighting. Z-fighting is fine. That means they're occupying the exact same space. That means it'll be a great bake. However, actually, this example is perfectly the opposite. So it's actually the red that's showing instead of the Lambert one, which is fine, because we know this is exactly where it needs to be. In fact, if we smooth it, I bet you. Let's click the red. How do we get the high poly? Alright, now it's Z-fighting. That's good. So click that, smooth preview, bring this back in. This should be Z-fighting now. Yeah, so that's great. Even though we already know that this is perfectly the size it needs to be. So what we're going to do is bevel this to fit this side here. So edge mode, select that edge, bevel, and we want these edges to line up to those edges. So maybe a fraction of 0.1, 0.08. That's looking pretty good. You'll notice this little tip up here. That's perfectly fine. We'll fix that. Tap Q, go back to object mode, maybe even drag this out. Or with that there, you can press Control 1 on your keyboard, and it'll solo whatever you have selected. And then if you want to get out of that, just have it selected, press Control 1 again, and it'll go back to your regular view. So with Control 1 pressed in, I'm going to go to vertex mode, select that vert. With radial menu, that's Shift, right click, hold them both down, merge vertices, so up, and then target weld tool down, and then release the mouse button. I'm going to click this vert once, click it again, and hold. Drag it over there, and release. Same deal with this one. Click, hold, drag it over there, release. And to be vertex efficient, we can technically click, hold, drag this one over there, and same deal here. So delete history, going to Control 1 to go back. So now when we bake, this shape will have all the shading detail of this, except there will be some obvious, this has a different silhouette than this, but this is just an easy bake. This is just examples. This is just to show you the process, to get you through the whole process of baking, texturing, and understanding it all. So we don't have to be too crazy about that. This is perfectly fine. So if you want to be fancy, you can go ahead and make more of these. The air one actually isn't that hard. I think it's just that. Just a -1 invert. And now you have the air elemental. This one is just everything we did except no wobbly bits. It's just flat. And then this is the same as this idea, or the same idea, except rather than cutting this way and following through, we're going to cut this way and manage that. If you want to make this whole set, that'd be cool. I mean, it'd be cool to say you did it and then show it to your friends. It's me. But we'll reverse this, make it 1. Bring this back here. Now we're going to marquee select all this, delete history, freeze transforms. I'm going to hit D on the keyboard, hold down X, hold down middle mouse button, drag out so it snaps around, snap it to 0, 0, 0, the origin of the world. Press W, press 1 to get rid of smooth preview, and then I have these two selected over here in the outliner. If you don't see your outliner, go to Windows, Outliner, it'll pop up. Got to figure out which one is which. This is the high poly. Do I have a copy of this over here already? Nope. Let's do that. Control D, bring it over here. Control S to save. We want to take our high poly, move this out of the way real quick, and name it stone water underscore high. And then our low poly will be stone water underscore low. And then remember, we've been doing smooth preview this whole time. Now we can actually smooth it. So without smooth preview on, because if you have smooth preview on and you smooth, it's going to smooth preview a smooth mesh, which is going to actually render a ton of polygons. And depending on if you know how good your computer is, you can either handle it or you can't. If it's too many, Maya will warn you. So just there's that. So tap 1, shift, right click, radio menu, smooth. For this assignment, just do 2 here. I just want to see that you know how to smooth and what your topology is. But when you go to bake, you probably want to smooth it to 3. So when you submit, for me, just submit this, and then if you close down Maya, come back the next week or whatever, just come back in, shift, right click to radio menu, smooth, and just smooth 1 iteration. So technically, you smooth twice the first time and 1 now, so that's 3 total. So I'm going to drop back just to 2 for my sake. So export that, and then with this zeroed here, export that, both as an FBX. So you can go to one at a time. Up here to File, Export Selection. Don't click the Options box. Everything you need is in here. There's a bunch of weird stuff with Options box. For our purposes, just click Export Selection. Go to Fbx Export and the files of type Fbx Export, and these settings underneath geometry should be fine. We're just worried about smoothing groups. We don't need to triangulate or any of that. If you don't see Fbx Export, I believe you can go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, search for FBX, and then make sure both of these, well, yeah, even that, you're going to want that turned on. Just make sure both of these are ticked. Loaded, auto load, loaded, auto load. And then just go back to File with this selected, with either of them selected really. File, Export Selection. We have our stone water low selected, so just name it stone water low export selection. And then with our high selected, just tap G to redo the same command. It even works with exporting. You can just click that to grab the same name and then call that high. Okay, that's your high and your low. And then next time we'll work on the cage. We'll work on setting up smoothing groups, which I think these are okay as are. Then we'll UV it, we'll bake it, we'll texture it, and we'll call it done.